Welcome to Melrose, Massachusetts, a lovely town only 11 miles north of Boston. Melrose has approximately 27,000 residents, most of whom participate in recycling. Unfortunately, like many communities, it has a few holdouts, curmudgeons, who resist change and efforts to improve conditions for everyone. We're going to look in on one of those individuals and find out why he's so insistent on not recycling.
Glaring at me every Monday morning. It's the same thing, taking out the trash.
Ken, you're obviously throwing a lot of glass and metal in the regular trash, and it could go in the recycling bin. Don't you realize this costs the city of Melrose money when you're not recycling?
Well, for starters, you could mind your own business and stop hassling me about it, but it doesn't make a lot of sense. I mean, it's not economically viable. It's just not sensible to me. We take the thing out, it's a lot of work, it's a lot of hassle, and it's just a bunch of socialist nonsense.
All right, well, obviously we have a lot to talk about on this topic, but I know we're both busy and have to get to work. Why don't you come over later and we'll talk it through? What do you say?
Okay, but no promises.
Fair enough. I'll see you tonight. Here you go, Ken.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Just trying to butter you up a little bit.
Oh yeah? Okay.
So tell me, why are you so down on recycling? I don't get it.
Well, I have a number of objections. One, it's not cost effective. And two, it's not cost effective. I have read some articles on the internet and also in the New York Times that recycling just doesn't make sense from an economic standpoint.
Okay. I sense a theme here. Ken, I agree with you. There actually is some truth to what you're saying. I think the key with recycling, when you think about the economics of it, is to look at the bigger picture. But, to your point, things like this plastic bottle, for example, it actually does cost more to make this out of recycled materials than it does to make it from raw materials. But looking at the bigger picture, I read some really interesting stats recently about the recycling industry that surprised even me. It actually employs more than 1 million people in the United States, and annual revenues for the recycling industry are something like $200 billion. So it's some pretty serious money. And then lastly, and this kind of affects us here in Melrose, is that cities and towns are saving real money through their recycling programs, about $3 billion total a year in the costs that we're saving from landfill disposal costs because we're putting more materials into the recycling stream. So again, I think when you look at the total economic picture, there actually are some really good reasons to recycle. But for me, the reasons are bigger than that. It's more than just the economics that are why we think it's important to recycle. The important reasons for me in terms of recycle is when we recycle plastics, we use less oil. So that's point number one. Point number two is when we recycle paper, we're using fewer trees.
Well, why care about saving petroleum and trees? I mean, there are a lot of jobs in this industry, and they're good jobs. It's good for the economy.
I agree with you, Ken. The jobs are really important, and there are good jobs in those industries. But with oil in particular, I think we have to face facts that it's not a renewable resource. We are going to run out of it at some point. And you yourself have told me that you're concerned about our dependence on foreign oil and what that does to the political situation.
Well, all right. You make a good point there.
Thanks. I'm glad we can agree on that point. But getting back to my second point, which was about trees and recycling paper, forests are more renewable than oil, but we don't have an endless supply of wood to build homes and meet all of the demand that there is. So we have to reduce our consumption of those raw materials.
Well, I never thought about that part.
Which actually brings me to another point that I wanted to ask you about. Do you know when we're going to run out of landfill space here in Massachusetts? Most people hadn't thought about that, and me neither. I actually just read this recently in the paper, that in the year 2020, our landfills in Massachusetts are going to be full. And at that point, we either have to incinerate, burn all of our trash, and that leads to pollution, or we have to pay a lot of money to ship it out of state for someone else to take it. So neither of those are good options. But landfills in and of themselves are pretty bad news anyway. When we put all these plastics and other chemicals into landfills, there are some pretty negative effects. In fact, over 200 former landfills have become Superfund sites. You know what a Superfund site is,
yeah,
right?
I've heard of those. Yeah.
Yeah, so when all that contamination happens, it actually costs billions of dollars, and some of that's taxpayer money to clean up that contamination. So, I think the more we can conserve resources and keep the trash out of landfills, it's a really smart thing to do.
I can see some of what you're saying.
That actually brings me to the fourth point that I wanted to mention. So we've talked about paper. That degrades reasonably well. But plastics underground actually take hundreds, even thousands of years to degrade. And while they're sitting there in a landfill, you have toxins and chemicals like BPA that are leaching into the ground, and that's contaminating the soil, it's contaminating water, doing a lot of harm actually to birds, fish, other kinds of wildlife, not to mention what it's doing to human beings.
Well, I can't argue with that, but can't you see that a lot of people's jobs depend on the oil, gas, and paper industries? And, that's a big part of our economy. And, recycling is not the gold mine that people make it out to be.
I agree with you. I'm not trying to say that recycling is some kind of a silver bullet, because it's really not. But again, I just think you have to think about the bigger picture. It's more than just the economics of it. With plastics, for example, it's just so important to reduce the problems that we have with plastics in landfills and all of the toxic chemical waste that creates. But since you brought up the economic side of it, earlier we were talking about how recycling a plastic bottle and recycled materials for plastics doesn't necessarily save money. But with metals, it's actually quite the opposite. When we make iron out of recycled material, it uses about 30% less energy than to go and mine and process iron from scratch. And with aluminum, the numbers are actually even more impressive. It's about 90% more efficient in terms of energy consumption. So I think there are some real compelling cases to be made for recycled materials like metals. Not to mention that when we reduce the amount of mining that we're doing, that takes a lot of burden off the environment. If you think about what mining does to the environment and that activity.
Well, I know we have some recycling plants up north, but are they viable? Do they make a profit?
Well, that's a good question, actually. So the major waste haulers in Massachusetts, like the one that serves Melrose here, are for-profit companies. They wouldn't be in business if they weren't making money. But that said, despite it being pretty successful, the recycling industry is actually facing quite a few challenges now. And solving those problems does require cooperation between residents like us and city governments to make sure that the recycling programs are a success. For the good of the planet and our future generations, we really need to make an effort to support our recycling programs and make them more efficient and productive.
Okay, Irene, I'm not totally selfish, I understand. But there are some other issues involved that it's trying to choose what to recycle, how to recycle. I'm not entirely clear on all of that.
Ken, I see your point, and we actually had the same challenge when we really tried to start recycling more here. Space challenges are really an issue. We had to make some adjustments. Do you want to come into the kitchen and see what we did? I might give you some ideas.
Absolutely. I'm curious to see what you folks did. Let's go.
So what we did here is to just take some space in our mudroom where we have the trash can and our single stream recycle bin here side by side. I actually got some of these ideas off the Melrose Recycling website, which is a really helpful resource if you haven't checked it out already. So what do you think about a recycling corner?
Well, it seems doable, but what about the hassle of recycling?
We were concerned about that too, because it seemed like it might just be extra work to put out the recycling. But what we found is that about half of what we used to put in the trash now goes into recycling. So instead of taking out 2 bins of trash every week, we're taking out, one of trash and one of recycling. So it's really not that much extra work.
Yeah, but it's confusing. I mean, there's, what do I recycle? What do I throw out? There's metal, there's paper, there's plastics, and I'm not quite sure what to do. I mean, it's not as simple as it sounds.
No.
Hi, Mr. Mudgeon. I heard you guys talking about recycling. We just did a unit on it in school. Do you want me to show you how we do it?
Hi, Jesse. Sure, I'd like to hear about it.
Sure. Well, in school they said it can be confusing, but really it's not so bad. There's just 4 things you need to remember that you can recycle. The first one is papers.
paper and cardboard.
Another thing you can recycle are metals.
Tin can and an aluminum pipe pan.
You can also recycle plastics.
Okay, plastic, sure.
And lastly, you can recycle glass items.
And even the metal top.
Yep. Here in Melrose, we make it simple by doing single stream recycling. That means that everything can go into the same bin. It can get a little complicated, but there's really just 3 things you need to remember that you can't recycle. Styrofoam, batteries, and plastic bags.
Plastic bags? Aren't they made of plastic?
Yes, but plastic bags are so lightweight that they get caught up in the machines. It wreaks havoc.
I've learned a lot in school, so what do I do with the 3 things that you can't recycle? For instance, styrofoam, what was it, batteries, and plastic bags?
Well, for styrofoam, you can bring them to special events at Public Works. They're free. And for batteries, alkaline batteries can go in the trash, but all other batteries can be taken to Public Works too. For plastic bags, you can bring them to grocery stores like Shaw's or Whole Foods or even Best Buy. Not to worry, Mr. Mudgeon, for these can also all go into the trash, but just not your recycle. Recycling experts are even working hard to make these items recyclable. Someday, we'll have technology to recycle almost anything. Wouldn't that be great?
It would indeed.
Ken, actually, I have a little token of appreciation for you. This is a handy sheet that we have that just tells us what you can put in your recycling bin and what you can't.
Okay, well, I'll read it over and we'll see what happens.
Well, that's the story of K.R. Mudgeon and his neighbor I.M. Green. 2 folks that sat down and shared some thoughts about recycling. Like Ken, we hope that if you don't believe in recycling, you'll reconsider and join us. After all, there are compelling reasons for recycling.